Hello, everyone. My name is Heather. I'm from Magnificent Mamas. I'm joined here today by Josefina and Allison.
Hi there, I'm Allison Spooner. I am an author. I have two collections of super short fiction, all less or around 1,000 words. And most recently, I published my novel, The Lost Girl, A Neverland Story, in October. All my books are available everywhere books are sold. I enjoy helping writers get past writer's block, inspiring other writers, giving help where needed, because I was once stuck in writer's block and got through it. So I love helping writers get through that. So you can find me on TikTok talking about my book.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your book? Like a little more in detail?
Yeah, for sure. So my flash fiction books are perfect for people that like to read but don't always have the time, or kind of with shorter attention spans, or if you just like to read but don't always know what you're in the mood to read. So like I said, they're super short stories. So they're either less than 1,000 words, some are even less than 500 words. You can read them in about 5 minutes or so, between doing things. If the kids are taking a nap, dropping them off at school, during a break at work, and you don't have to dedicate all the time you might need to a whole novel or even a whole chapter of a novel. And if you're not in the mood, you don't know what you're in the mood to read, they cross all genres, sci-fi, fantasy. There's a few lighthearted romance in there, but they tend to veer toward the dark and creepy, light horror.
Yeah, I am most interested to hear about your Neverland story.
Yeah, and that is my most recent release, my first novel. It is The Lost Girl, A Neverland Story. Lucky enough to have a best friend who's also a comic book artist and was kind enough to design my cover. The book is about Peter Pan's great granddaughter. And if you are familiar with the movie Hook, it does kind of follow that premise. So Peter Pan has gone home, grown up, had children, and at this point passed away, as one does when one chooses to grow up. And now his great granddaughter who is 13, has been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And when doctors kind of give up hope and tell her there are no other options, her mother sends her to Neverland to see if that will save her life.
I want to read that right now. That is so good. That's fantastic. I love that.
I love sci-fi fantasy, so that definitely appeals to me.
So if you like Peter Pan, if you like fantasy, if there's, something for everybody, and you don't even have to have followed the Peter Pan story. It does stand alone on its own. It has fun nods to Hook. If you are familiar with that, you'll find some fun Easter eggs in there.
Peter Pan is just my weakness, just slightly up to that story. So that makes me really excited to read that.
Yeah, well, that's what I like to hear. And you can get it from me directly. I can get signed copies sent out through my website, or available on Amazon, of course. Or you can always go into a local bookstore and have them order it, local library, basically anywhere you can get books.
Where did you get the inspiration for him having a granddaughter? You said she was his granddaughter, right?
I wanted it to be a little removed from Peter Pan. I wanted him to have been gone for a little while from Neverland. Also a little bit with copyright came into play. So Peter Pan is in the public domain, but Hook is not. So I could not use characters from Hook. So in Hook, Maggie is his daughter. I couldn't really use Maggie or Jack in the book. So I made up Maggie's daughter and gave her the name Moira. She would have been named after her grandmother. So in order to scooch by the copyright restrictions, I had to make up the characters. And so that I didn't have to reference them very often, made them a little more removed from immediate Peter Pan family.
I love the character development and world building. I'm always curious, especially with authors that write in fantasy and sci-fi, their inspiration, where they came up with the ideas. And I mean, obviously now Peter Pan, but more so because you're creating your character, and I love sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah, it was really fun, and I kind of lucked out with using Neverland. So I'm not a high fantasy fan. I like books with fantasy element to them, and as a writer, I didn't want to have to do a ton of world building. So with this, it made it a little easier. Neverland is already pretty solidified in all of our minds. We know what Neverland is, so I didn't have to do a ton of describing of it. but I describe it enough to get you into the story, but I didn't have to make it up. But I did give it a few unique elements. There are some ways with which Angela interacts with the world. So Angela, the main character, I guess I didn't ever say her name, that are unique to just my story rather than getting the normal kind of lore of Peter Pan.
If you could co-write a book with any author, living or dead, who would it be?
Oh my gosh, that's a question I've never gotten before. So I would have to say Harper Lee, that wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. So I always kind of quote To Kill a Mockingbird as one of my favorite books of all time.
Here's one for you. If you could bring one of your characters to life for a day, who would it be and what would you do together?
Oh my gosh, bring one of my characters to life for a day. I probably should say like my main character, but there's a little character named Pidge in Neverland, in the Neverland story, in The Lost Girl. He's just such a fun, cute little character that I would just have to bring him to life and kind of just I would probably just let him do his thing. So I say in the book that he's been in Neverland for a really, really long time, so he probably doesn't remember much. So I would just follow him around while he discovers everything.
That would be awesome. Okay, so if your book was made into a movie or a TV series, who would your dream cast for the main characters be?
Oh my goodness. These are not the usual ones I could ask.
Nope. You gotta stand out.
And honestly, I haven't, I think a lot of authors think about this, but I don't think I have given this a lot of thought because I don't know young actors.
See, with mine, like, I do the inspiration for the characters looking like at pictures and stuff, but then the personalities are totally different than pictures that kind of inspire the look of how I feel my character is.
Yeah. When I was making like a little inspiration board of kind of how Angela would look, I think I used a couple pictures of Millie Bobby Brown, but now she's in her 20s or older, so can't really, she couldn't play her. And I don't know any actor. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, like really young actors who are like 13, 14.
Hugh Jackman is good at like everything.
Yeah. There's no music in this, but they can make it a no musical if they wanted.
I love me some Hugh Jackman, so anything that he's in, I will always watch.
Do you have in your book any like subplots or deleted scenes that you would say that didn't make it to the final version?
Yeah, so I have a prologue that I wrote. That was actually when I first started writing the book. It was the first thing that I wrote about the book, and it was called, like, the title of the prologue or that section was The Death of Peter Pan. And so it was kind of about his last years here with his family and with his granddaughter, telling her his stories from Neverland in the last years, and kind of him passing away. And that was going to be the prologue of the book, but through final edits and sending it off to other readers that I trusted, I got some feedback that maybe the prologue was not needed and that the information from the prologue could be easily, spread throughout the book. The prologue was in Moira's point of view. And the feedback I got was that it might be a little confusing to start in Moira's and then switch to Angela's. It was a little hard to tell. And so ultimately I ended up taking out the prologue. But if you join my newsletter, I think very soon I will be sending out the prologue to my newsletter subscribers.
Definitely. We will have to do that.
What's the weirdest or most unexpected place you found inspiration for a story?
I don't know if it's weird or unexpected, but I was in Florida and we were in like a regular park playground. They had a lot of willow trees, which we don't have. We have them in Michigan, but not a ton. I don't know, not as many, I guess. But I was just kind of struck by the willow trees, and I've always really liked them, but there were just so many more there. And actually, while I was in Florida, I was taking part in a online writing contest where I had to write a story in 48 hours, and it just happened to be the same 48 hours I was in Florida, which was great timing on my part, but it worked out. And I actually ended up, the story I wrote was called The Guardians of Willow, about a princess that ends up running away from her castle and living amongst the trees, and the trees kind of raise her, and they're willow, and I pictured them as willow trees kind of holding her in their arms and raising her and naming her Willow and being her guardians. And so that's actually a story in one of my flash fiction collections.
Do you have any questions for her, Josefina?
Have any of your characters ever gone rogue? I hear a lot of authors talk about, you want the story to go a certain way, or you're thinking that the story is going to go a certain way, and then you start writing it, and then they start telling you their version of the story, and it just completely goes awry. Like, has that ever happened to you?
Not terribly. And not like in a terrible way or anything. Because before I wrote this novel, I only wrote flash fiction, so they didn't have a lot of time to go awry. So they were very short and concise. So usually they listen and pay attention, and before they could go awry, I had finished the story. So, and in this one, they were pretty well behaved. I'd have to say, Angela probably gave me her own surprises throughout, less than maybe how she reacted to things, but not terribly. So I haven't had a lot of chances for that to happen yet.
So you don't use like an outline or anything like that?
Not at first, no. As I got through kind of toward the end and I knew how I wanted it to wrap up, I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I have to figure out, I'm here, I have to figure out how I'm going to get to here. So, but at first I just started writing because I had a basic idea. This idea had been marinating in my head for quite a while before I actually sat down to write it. So by the time I sat down to write it, it came out pretty fully formed until I got kind of toward the end and I needed to pull all the pieces together. So at that point I got out the old murder board and put up some note cards and, said, okay, well, I need them to get to here. What's happening here? And I did plot the end kind of just to get there. No, in general, I'm a pretty big pantser. Although my next project, I did outline it. My next project, I'm hoping to publish in October. So I feel like the more I talk about it, the more I have to publish in October. So it is another young adult, this time with kind of a paranormal twist. So it is about 18-year-old Callie and her dad passed away about a year before the book takes place, and due to complications with alcoholism, and suddenly he is back as a ghost, kind of following her around, talking to her, trying to bond, making her plan to kind of really bury those years, bury the past, very, very hard with him right in front of her. So she's kind of got to figure out why he's here, what he wants, what she needs to do to get him to go away. Does she even really want him to go away? All those questions that come up when the past suddenly thrusts into your face.
All right. Well, I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up and make sure you send us all your info and we will be happy to share it and read it.
Awesome. Yeah. I will send all the socials, probably the link tree that has everything on it.
Yeah,
so.
That's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
We got it.
That sounds good. All right, guys.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.